The Voldorian Confederation had perfected the art of diplomatic intimidation down to a science, which, considering they'd been practicing it for roughly 3,000 years, was hardly surprising. Their latest masterpiece in psychological warfare involved something they called honor isolation, a delightfully twisted tradition where difficult prisoners were left alone with their most fearsome warriors until said prisoners either broke completely or, more commonly, died of sheer terror. Ambassador Kextera adjusted his ceremonial throat sac with the satisfaction of someone who'd just solved a particularly annoying puzzle. The humans had been causing diplomatic headaches for months now, refusing to acknowledge their obvious inferiority in the galactic pecking order. Their representative, Dr. Elena Vasquez, had committed the unforgivable sin of actually reading the fine print in trade agreements and, worse still, asking pointed questions about resource allocation that made several council members uncomfortably aware of their own corruption. The solution, Kextera had announced to the Confederation High Council with theatrical flair, is elegantly simple. We introduce the good doctor to Zeph'kol of the Catharian war caste. 3 days alone with our most decorated apex predator should adequately demonstrate the fragility of human resolve. The council had chittered their approval with the enthusiasm of beings who'd never actually met a human but had heard they were supposedly made of meat and bad decisions. Zeph'kol himself stood 7 feet tall, possessed retractable claws that could slice through titanium, and had earned his reputation by single-handedly ending the rebellion of the Twisted Moons. His species had evolved from something that made Earth's extinct saber-toothed tigers look like house cats with anxiety disorders. What the Confederation hadn't bothered to investigate, because honestly, who had time for actual research when you could rely on assumptions, was that Dr. Elena Vasquez held degrees in xenobiology, comparative anatomy, and emergency medicine. She'd also spent 5 years working in refugee camps on 3 different worlds, which meant she'd seen enough genuine horror to develop an impressively unflappable demeanor when faced with things that were merely trying to look scary. The diplomatic suite where they conducted these charming little isolation experiments was designed to maximize psychological pressure. The walls were a lovely shade of institutional despair, the lighting system was programmed to flicker at frequencies known to induce anxiety in most species, and the temperature controls had been set to mildly uncomfortable by someone with a degree in creative sadism. When the heavy doors sealed shut with a finality that suggested they wouldn't be opening again for quite some time, Elena found herself alone with what the Confederation confidently believed was her worst nightmare. Zeph'kol crouched in the far corner, his crystalline eyes reflecting the stuttering light like fragments of broken stars. His breathing was controlled, predatory, and accompanied by a low rumbling that most creatures would interpret as prepare to die horribly. Elena, however, tilted her head and frowned with the expression of someone trying to solve a particularly interesting medical puzzle. That's not normal respiratory function, she observed, pulling out a small scanner from her diplomatic kit. Are you experiencing pain in your thoracic cavity? Zeph'kol's rumbling stopped abruptly. In 3,000 years of Catharian history, no one had ever responded to their intimidation display by inquiring about potential respiratory distress. You. What? His voice carried the gravelly undertones of someone whose vocal cords had evolved for roaring challenges across battlefields. Your breathing pattern suggests either old injuries to the intercostal muscles or possibly scarring in the pleural cavity. Elena continued, approaching with the calm confidence of someone who'd spent years treating beings who could accidentally kill her with a sneeze. May I? The absurdity of the situation struck Zeph'kol like a physical blow. Here he was, the terror of 7 systems, the undefeated champion of the honor circles, and this small human was treating him like a patient in need of medical attention. His warrior's pride suggested he should be offended. His chronically aching ribs, however, were suddenly very interested in whatever this strange creature was offering. I suppose, he rumbled, sinking down from his aggressive crouch into something resembling a sitting position. Elena's scanner beeped cheerfully as she ran it over his torso, her expression growing more fascinated by the second. Oh, this is remarkable. Your bone density is nearly triple that of comparable Earth mammals, and your muscle fiber composition. Wait, how did you sustain this level of damage to your lower ribs? Combat Zeph'kol replied automatically, then found himself adding, the siege of Korvac Prime, enemy artillery. And they just left it to heal naturally. Elena's tone carried the professional outrage of someone who'd seen too many preventable medical complications. No wonder you're having respiratory issues. The bone fragments are pressing against your diaphragm. That must be incredibly painful. For the first time in decades, someone was looking at Zeph'kol and seeing not a weapon of war, but a person who was hurting. The novelty of it was so overwhelming he found himself answering her questions with the honesty of someone who'd forgotten he was supposed to be terrifying. Kytherians heal as we fight, he explained, watching her work with growing fascination. To seek medical aid is considered weakness. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Elena replied with the casual bluntness of someone whose bedside manner had been forged in emergency rooms. And I once treated a politician who insisted his chest pain was just aggressive patriotism. She produced a small medical kit from her diplomatic pouch. Apparently human diplomats came better prepared than their Confederation counterparts had assumed, and began preparing what looked suspiciously like actual medical treatment. This might feel strange, she warned, but I can realign those bone fragments and reduce the inflammation. The pain relief should be immediate. Zeph'kol submitted to her ministrations with the bewildered compliance of someone whose entire worldview was quietly rearranging itself. The treatment involved sonic therapy, targeted anti-inflammatory compounds, and a level of gentle competence that he'd never associated with anything related to combat or conflict. When she finished, he took his first truly deep breath in 15 years. How do you feel? Elena asked, packing away her equipment with the satisfaction of someone who just solved an interesting problem. Zeph'kol paused, searching for words that didn't exist in the Kytherian war tongue. Better, much better. Why would you do this? Elena shrugged. You were in pain. I'm a doctor. It's not complicated. But it was complicated, at least from Zeph'kol's perspective. The Confederation had told him this human was weak, cowardly, unworthy of respect. Yet she'd approached him without fear, diagnosed a medical condition his own people had ignored for decades, and treated him with a competence that spoke of extensive training and genuine skill. Tell me about your world, he said suddenly, settling back against the wall in a position that was relaxed rather than aggressive. Elena raised an eyebrow. That's not very apex predator-like behavior. Perhaps, Zeph'kol replied with what might have been amusement. I am not very good at being an apex predator. What followed was the most unlikely conversation in recent galactic history. Elena described Earth's biodiversity with the enthusiasm of someone who'd spent years studying it, while Zeph'kol found himself sharing stories of Kytherian crystal singing, an art form his people practiced but never mentioned to outsiders because it didn't fit their warrior image. You mean you're actually artists? Elena asked, her eyes lighting up with the same fascination she'd shown for his respiratory issues. We express emotions through crystal formations, Zeph'kol admitted, producing a small harmonic crystal from his belt. When he touched it, it resonated with a hauntingly beautiful tone that seemed to capture something essential about loneliness and longing. That's incredible. The mathematical precision required to create harmonic resonance at that frequency. May I analyze the crystal structure? Before long they were deep in a discussion about the intersection of art, mathematics, and emotional expression that would have made any philosophy professor weep with joy. Elena's scanner revealed that Kytherian crystals were grown rather than carved, using bioelectric fields that were controlled by the artist's emotional state. So you're not just warriors, Elena observed. You're warrior philosophers with an advanced understanding of resonant mathematics and bioelectric manipulation. The Confederation prefers to emphasize the warrior aspect, Zeph'kol replied dryly. Of course they do. It's much easier to exploit people when you can pretend they're one-dimensional. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of food-standard Confederation rations that looked like they'd been designed by committee to be as unappetizing as possible while still technically qualifying as nutrition. Elena examined the meal with the critical eye of someone who'd eaten military rations on multiple worlds. Well, this looks like despair with a side of regret. Confederation cuisine is not renowned for its palatability, Zeph'kol agreed. I might be able to help with that. Elena produced what appeared to be a small hydroponic garden from her diplomatic kit. Human diplomats have learned to be self-sufficient when it comes to actual food. Within an hour, She'd transformed the sterile diplomatic suite into something resembling a functioning laboratory kitchen hybrid. The hydroponic system was producing fresh herbs and vegetables, while her portable synthesizer was creating protein structures that actually resembled food rather than building materials. How is this possible? Zeph'kol asked, watching her work with the fascination of someone discovering that magic was real and surprisingly practical. Necessity, mostly. Have you ever tried Regelian diplomatic food? It's like eating disappointment that's been left out in the rain. They shared their first real meal together as the artificial day cycle dimmed to evening. Elena had managed to create something that actually tasted good, while Zeph'kol contributed fruits from his homeworld that he'd been saving for special occasions. This is perhaps the finest meal I have had since leaving Kytheria, he said with genuine appreciation. Really, it's just basic nutrition with some flavor enhancement. You underestimate yourself, Zeph'kol replied. This required knowledge, skill, preparation, and most importantly, the desire to share something good with another being. These are not small things. As the second day began, their unlikely partnership had evolved into something resembling actual friendship. Elena had spent the morning studying Kytherian physiology and had made several observations that fascinated them both, while Zeph'kol had been teaching her the basics of crystal harmonics. Your people's healing philosophy is completely backwards, Elena observed, adjusting the resonance frequency of a small crystal. You've developed one of the most sophisticated biotechnology systems I've ever seen, but you refuse to use it for medical applications. The warrior's path requires accepting pain as part of strength, Zeph'kol recited, though his tone suggested he was questioning this wisdom. That's not strength, that's just masochism with better marketing. True strength is using every tool available to help yourself and others reach their full potential. And what is humanity's full potential? Zeph'kol asked with genuine curiosity. Elena considered this seriously. I think we're very good at adapting. We see problems and we solve them, even if the solution seems impossible or impractical. We're also good at cooperation, not just with our own species but with anyone willing to work with us. The Confederation believes humans are weak because you lack natural weapons. The Confederation, Elena replied with a grin that was equal parts amusement and challenge, doesn't understand that the most dangerous weapon in the universe is a curious mind with access to sufficient resources. On the third day, their conversation took a turn toward the philosophical implications of interspecies cooperation. Elena had been analyzing Kytherian bioelectric field generation, while Zeph'kol had been learning about human medical technology. Your people's approach to healing, he observed, watching her work, treats the body as a system to be understood rather than an enemy to be conquered. Well, yes, fighting your own biology is generally counterproductive. Better to work with it, figure out what it needs, and provide those things in the most efficient way possible. This philosophy, it extends to other areas, pretty much everything. Actually, diplomacy, engineering, agriculture. The basic principle is the same. Understand the system, work with its natural tendencies and make small adjustments to achieve better outcomes. Zeph'kol was quiet for a long moment, processing this. His entire culture was built around the concept of strength through opposition, yet here was this human demonstrating that cooperation and understanding could achieve results that pure force never could. I have been thinking, he said finally, about the nature of true strength. Oh, a warrior who fights alone can only be as strong as himself, but a warrior who fights alongside others, his strength is multiplied by every alliance he forges. Elena nodded approvingly. Now you're getting it. The strongest humans aren't the ones who can lift the most weight or run the fastest. They're the ones who can bring out the best in everyone around them. And perhaps, Zeph'kol mused, the strongest civilizations are not those who conquer others but those who inspire others to become their best selves. Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by the sound of the chamber doors beginning to unlock. Ambassador Kexthara was returning, undoubtedly expecting to find either Elena's broken remains or her cowering in terror while begging for mercy. Instead, he found Elena and Zeph'kol sitting companionably beside a small table, sharing what appeared to be actual food while engaged in animated discussion about resonant frequency mathematics. Elena was wearing Zeph'kol's spare cloak, a gesture of friendship among Kytherians, while Zeph'kol was carefully examining one of her medical scanners with the fascination of someone discovering a new art form. What is this? Kextherar sputtered, his throat sac inflating with indignation. Oh, hello, Elena said cheerfully, looking up from the crystal harmonic she'd been learning to tune. You're back early. We were just discussing the potential applications of bioelectric field therapy in treating chronic pain conditions. You were supposed to be. Kextherar gestured helplessly at Zeph'kol, intimidated, terrorized, broken. Why would I be intimidated? Elena asked with genuine confusion. Zeph'kol is fascinating. Did you know that Kytherian crystal singing involves real-time manipulation of molecular structures using controlled bioelectric fields? The level of precision required is absolutely incredible. Zeph'kol rose to his full height, and for a moment Kextherar felt a surge of satisfaction. Surely now the predator would demonstrate his nature. Instead, Zeph'kol placed one massive hand gently on Elena's shoulder, a gesture of protection rather than aggression. Ambassador Kextherar, he rumbled, his voice carrying new harmonics that Elena had taught him would convey respect and authority simultaneously. I wish to make a formal declaration before the Confederation Council. A declaration, Doctor. Elena Vasquez has demonstrated intellectual courage, practical wisdom, and personal honor that exceeds any warrior I have known. By the ancient codes of my people, I name her battle sister and claim her under the protection of the Kytherian war clans. The implications of this statement hit Kextherar like a physical blow. In Kytherian culture, the title of battle sister was reserved for the most honored allies, those who had proven themselves worthy of absolute trust and protection. It hadn't been awarded to an outsider in over 1,000 years. More importantly, it meant that anyone who wanted to harm Elena would have to go through not just Zeph'kol but the entire Kytherian military hierarchy. Since the Kytherians formed the backbone of the Confederation's military forces, this was roughly equivalent to Elena being declared untouchable by Galactic law. Furthermore, Zeph'kol continued with the inexorable certainty of someone stating obvious facts. I formally request that the Confederation Council reconsider humanity's classification within our diplomatic hierarchy. Any species capable of producing individuals of Dr. Vasquez caliber deserves recognition as equals rather than subjects. Elena blinked in surprise. That's very kind of you, but you don't have to. It is not kindness. Zeph'kol interrupted gently. It is simple honesty. You have shown me that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to heal, the courage to understand, and the honor to treat others with dignity regardless of their apparent power. Word of Zeph'kol's declaration spread through the Confederation hierarchy with the speed of scandal and the impact of a diplomatic earthquake. Within hours, representatives from a dozen species were requesting private audiences with the human diplomat who had somehow transformed the galaxy's most feared warrior into her personal advocate. The irony was not lost on Elena, who found herself elevated from minor irritant to major political player through the simple expedient of treating another being with basic human decency. The Confederation had intended to break her spirit, and instead had inadvertently created the most unlikely diplomatic revolution in recent galactic history. Ambassador Kextherar, faced with the political equivalent of a natural disaster, did what politicians throughout the universe do when confronted with the consequences of their own stupidity. He held a press conference and claimed it had been his plan all along. The honor isolation protocol, he announced to the gathered media, was designed to test the diplomatic potential of species seeking elevated status within the Confederation. Dr. Vasquez has clearly demonstrated that humanity possesses the wisdom and strength necessary for full membership. Elena, watching this performance from the diplomatic gallery, leaned over to whisper to Zeph'kol, "Does he actually believe that?" Politicians, Zeph'kol replied with what she had learned to recognize as Kytherian amusement, possess the remarkable ability to convince themselves that their failures were actually elaborate successes. That's actually kind of impressive in a deeply disturbing way. The final irony came 3 months later, when Elena and Zeph'kol's collaborative research into bioelectric healing techniques revolutionized medical treatment for 17 different species. Their joint paper, published in the Journal of Xenobiological Medicine, became the most cited research document in Confederation history. The Confederation Council,
faced with the undeniable evidence that cooperation produced better results than intimidation, quietly began revising their diplomatic protocols. The honor isolation chambers were converted into collaborative research facilities, and Ambassador Kextherar found himself promoted to head the new Department of Interspecies Cooperation, a position that kept him busy enough that he couldn't cause any more diplomatic incidents. Elena eventually returned to Earth, but not before establishing the Vasquez Zeph'kol Institute for Xenobiological Research, jointly funded by the Confederation and the newly formed Human-Kytherian Alliance. The institute's motto, suggested by Zeph'kol and approved by Elena, was elegantly simple: strength through understanding. And if anyone had bothered to ask the institute's co-founders about the secret to their success, they would have given the same answer that Elena had provided on that first day: it's not complicated. You see someone who needs help, you figure out how to help them, and you do it because it's the right thing to do. The fact that this apparently revolutionary concept had somehow managed to reshape galactic politics was, as Elena frequently observed, probably more of a commentary on the quality of existing galactic politics than on the brilliance of basic human decency. But then again, she reflected, sometimes the most profound changes come from the simplest ideas, like the revolutionary notion that treating people with dignity and respect might actually produce better results than trying to scare them into submission. Who would have thought?